You've probably gathered that the service today is a focus on evil. That's our monthly theme, good and evil. And my sermon is going to address this the best I can. In thinking about evil, I have come to recognize how the Columbine shooting has permeated my time as a minister. It occurred April 20th, 1999, 1 month before I had my final interview before the Unitarian Universalist Ministerial Fellowship Committee to become a minister, and about 1 month after this church was officially chartered as a Unitarian Universalist congregation. When you go before the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, you give a sermon. So, of course, I spoke about Columbine. I went to a service on the Friday after then, 3 days after the shooting, at the Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church, which is very close to the high school. Our intention was to bless the space and the community so that it could feel assured and safer when it officially regathered that Sunday. When the Tuesday shooting occurred, I was home, and I had the television on, and I watched the story unfold, as so many others did. After I got my daughters home from their schools, I stopped watching, but they had heard that something terrible had happened, and their schools had been locked down that day, and so they were scared too. I remember that I got 13 phone calls that evening from family and friends from all over the country. My address at the time was Littleton, although I live in Arapahoe County and in the Littleton School District, not Jefferson County, where Columbine is. A year later, after I had become the minister of this new church, we had a memorial in our service to remember the 1-year anniversary. I remember it being a difficult decision at the time, but I had 13 candles for the victims and 2 separate candles for the perpetrators. Very few people noticed, but the 2 candles for Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris went out during the service, while the other candles remained lit. I've never mentioned that in a sermon before. The next year, this Prairie community would go through 9/11 together. And as horrific as that was, I felt for the first time the reverberations in my heart from Columbine during another national tragedy. And these reverberations have occurred many more times, with so many more shootings. The Amish School in 2006, Virginia Tech in 2007, the Aurora Theater in July 2012, so close again to home, Sandy Hook Elementary in December 2012, and then a year later, the December 14th, 2013 shooting of Claire Davis at Arapahoe High School. I live in the neighborhood across from that school, and that's where my daughters went to school. And then the shooting at the AME Church in Charleston in June 2015, this June's horrific shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Florida, and the mass killing of 5 police officers in Dallas this past July. And of course, there have also been so many other tragic events that have occurred in churches, schools, workplaces, nightclubs, malls. And now we, as Unitarian Universalists, have taken a stand for Black Lives Matter, which recognizes the disproportionate numbers of unarmed Black men and people of color who have been shot or hurt by police. Here, the violence may often be caused more by fear than some form of intention, but the pattern, to me, reveals an evil somewhere in our society. Philosopher Susan Neiman argues that the word evil is so weighted with history and baggage that it's hard to define, but we can all see its effect. To call something evil, she says, is a way of marking the fact that it shatters our trust in the world. Someone touched by evil also may become permanently disoriented by it. Journalist Dave Cullen writes in the last few pages of his book, Columbine, that every time there is a big story about another shooting, he cringes for the surviving families of Columbine. It took a while to realize that many shootings were battering the old survivors, he writes, every time. Connie Sanders, the daughter of teacher Dave Sanders killed at the school, is one of the more resilient. She told Cullen that it feels like a dark coldness pumping through a damaged heart, like demons stealing my breath. I don't want anyone else to understand it, because you only understand it when you have been welcomed into a club only the saddest people may enter. The cost of admission is the death of your loved one at the hands of someone else. If we could take all the politics and all the arguments about why so many people of all kinds are killed in our society, what we would need to be able to come to understand is that many people have had their trust in the world shattered, which was a universal effect of 9/11 in our country, and may be reliving their personal horror every time they see more such killings. I feel the reverberations of this pain because of Columbine, and I was simply a mom living nearby, trying to hold my children. And I know that many in this congregation experienced this pain and experience it today as well, caused by that tragedy or perhaps any of the many others. We always ask, why, when it happens again? Much of the time, the mass shootings are done by someone with a history of mental illness, which makes it harder for those who suffer from depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, and other conditions to get the help they need and not feel stigmatized. The more unintended shootings are often the result of the fight-flight response of our reptilian brains. We are so imperfect in our humanity, and we don't function very well when we are afraid. And then there are those out-and-out psychopaths, like Eric Harris, who come the closest to operating from the standpoint of trying to be pure evil. The brains of psychopaths, by the way, are wired differently, so that their reactions and emotions appear differently in brain scans than those of normal humans. Again, we're digging around trying to understand why, but one thing we've learned is they have virtually no capacity for empathy. What I know, and what I believe most of you know, is that evil exists. For me, it's not a battle between God and the devil, but a battle within the human mind and human heart. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. pondered the existence of evil and the complacency, especially of the good people, of so many when faced with evil within the racist, demeaning, and often deadly Jim Crow South. How could people be so silent? He concluded that there is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. We are all capable of evil. It can be intentional, or it can come out anytime we are on autopilot. It can leap out of our mouths when we are angry or frustrated or tired. For evil isn't just gargantuan in its aspect, it is also small and banal. The phrase, the banality of evil, was coined by philosopher Hannah Arendt after witnessing the trial of Nazi Adolf Eichmann, who seemed, at least to Arendt, to be the most mundane of individuals, whose evil acts were driven by the requirements of the state and orders from above. For if we lose the battle of evil in our hearts, it can affect and permeate our human systems, with Hitler's Germany being the most obvious example. For the subtler way that evil works and takes sway, despite all the intensities of the shootings I've been talking about, is to not respond to it. I know from my own reverberations of Columbine that every time something violent happens, that my initial response is usually freeze. I feel numb and unable to respond. It takes everything in me to plan a vigil or to go to one. I want to stay home the way I did the day Columbine happened. So it often takes a real faith to leave your home and to venture out with others to try to repair the fabric of our communities, to bring solace to the broken hearts, and to re-bless those broken places. Evil will not go away, and its only antidote is action. As Dr. King also said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. This means that it's also better to speak up, risk being wrong, being called wrong-headed, because there's few things more important than to stand with others who are in pain. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Dr. King asked. What are you doing for others? If you focus your heart and mind on the good you can do in our world, you will be fighting evil, including that evil that resides even within your own heart. And if we do this work together, then our community also will be fighting evil. Working for justice, taking another step on Theodore Parker's arc of the universe, which is moral and bending toward justice. Over these last 17 years, we began this church by meeting the needs of those who founded it with their children. And then we began to imagine the needs of others who might find us, and we intentionally created this wonderful, caring community that offers assurance and solace, that appreciates differences of all kinds, that brings compassion and understanding to anyone who joins us. And we are now in the phase of creating a larger Unitarian Universalist mission. What this church could do out there in the world. What does this church stand for? This church is meant to provide a home for your heart, to give you a place where you can grow that heart by caring for others, doing things for others, as Dr. King said, and then join with those to make a difference in our larger community. We need this place, this Prairie home, because we need one another to live into the best versions of ourselves. And we need to be able to do together what none of us can do alone. And we need one another every time the world ends, every time evil strikes, so that we can bless one another, sit in prayer and meditation together, and point one another back toward the light. Amen.